That's a large-scale attack.
More than that. One G sees you, comes after you, and moans. A click away, another G hears that moan, comes after it, and moans himself. Then another one, another click away, then another. Dude, if the area's thick enough, if the chain's unbroken, who knows how far you can pull them in from? And we're talking one after the other here. Try 10 every click, 100, 1,000. They started piling up, forming this artificial palisade at the first range marker, this ridge of corpses that got higher and higher each minute. We were actually building an undead fortification, creating a situation where all we had to do was pop every head that popped over the top. The brass had planned for this. They had a periscope tower thingy that let officers see right over the wall. They also had real-time downlinks from satellites and recon drones, although we, the grunts, had no idea what they were seeing. Land Warrior was gone for now, so all we had to do was concentrate on what was in front of our faces. We started getting contacts from all sides, either coming around the wall or else being drawn in from our flanks and even rear. Again, the brass was waiting for this and ordered us to form an RS.
A reinforced square. But you did have enough ammunition.
More than enough. The vehicles were packed to their roofs. We had water, we had replacements. If you needed a fiver, you just raised your weapon, and one of the sandlers would jump in and take our place on the firing line. You'd grab a bite of eye ration, soak your face, stretch, drain the weasel. No one would ever volunteer for a fiver, but they had these KO9 teams, combat shrinks who were observing everyone's performance. They'd been with us since our early days on the range, knew us each by name and face, and knew, don't ask me how, when the stress of battle was starting to degrade our performance. We didn't know. I certainly didn't. There were a couple of times I'd miss a shot, or maybe take a half second instead of a full. Then suddenly I'd get this tap on my shoulder, and I knew I was out of it for 5.
What about at night?
We used searchlights from the vehicles, powerful, red-coated beams so it didn't mess with your night vision. The only creepy thing about night fighting, other than the redness from the lights, is the glow a round makes when it enters the head. That's why we call them cherry pies, because if the bullet's chem comp wasn't mixed right, it would burn so bright it made their eyes glow red. That was a cure for constipation, especially later on nights when you pulled guard duty and one would come out of you out of the dark. Those glowing red eyes, frozen in time the second before it falls.
He shivers. How did you know the battle was over?
When we stopped shooting? No, actually, that's a good question. Around 0400 it started to taper off. Heads weren't poking out as much. The moan was dying down. The officers didn't tell us the attack was almost over, but you could see them looking through their scopes, talking on their radios. You could see the relief in their faces. I think the last shot was fired just before dawn. After that, we were just waiting for the first light. It was kind of eerie, the sun rising over this mountainous ring of corpses. We were totally walled in. All sides were piled at least 20 feet high and over 100 feet deep. I'm not sure how many we killed that day. Stats always vary on who you get it from. The dozer blade Humvees had to push a path through the corpse ring just to let us get out. There were still living Gs, some slow ones who were late to the party, or who had tried to climb up and over their dead friends and had slid back down into the mound. When we started burying the bodies, they came tumbling out. That was the only time Senior Lobo saw any action. At least we didn't have to stick around for BS duty. They had another unit waiting in reserve to clean up. I guess the brass figured we'd done enough for one day. We marched 10 miles to the east, set up a bivouac with watchtowers and concertina walls. I was so damn beat. I don't remember the chem shower, turning in my gear to be disinfected, turning in my weapon for inspection. Not one jam, not the whole unit. I don't even remember slipping into my bag. They let us sleep as late as we wanted the next day. That was pretty sweet. Eventually the voices woke me up, everyone jawing, laughing, telling stories. It was a different vibe, 180 from 2 days ago. I couldn't really put a finger on what I was feeling. Maybe it was what the president said about reclaiming our future. I just knew it felt good, better than I had the entire war. I knew it was going to be a real long-ass road. I knew our campaign across America was just beginning. But hey, as the Prez said later that first night, at least it was the beginning of the end.
Denver, Colorado. A day later. I meet Todd Wainio at Denver's Victory Park. the perfect setting to continue his tale. The weather is excellent for the neighborhood picnic that we're attending. The fact that not one sighting has been recorded this spring gives everyone even more chance for celebration. Todd Wainio stands in the outfield, waiting for a high fly ball that he claims will never come. Perhaps he's right, as no one seems to mind me standing next to him.
They called it the Road to New York, and it was a long, long road. We had 3 main Army groups, North, Center, and South. The grand strategy was to advance as one across the Great Plains, across the Midwest, then break off at the Appalachians. The wings sweeping north and south, shoot for Maine and Florida, then grind across the coast and link up with the AG Center as they slogged it over the mountains. It was slow. 3 years.
Why so slow?
Dude, take your pick. Food transport, terrain, weather, enemies, battle doctrine. Doctrine was to advance as 2 solid lines, one behind the other, stretching from Canada to Aztlan. No, Mexico. It wasn't Aztlan yet. You know how when a plane goes down, how all these firemen or whoever would check a field for pieces of wreckage? They'd all go in a line, real slow, making sure not 1 inch of ground was missed. That was us. We didn't skip 1 damn inch between the Rockies and the Atlantic. Whenever you spotted Zach, either in a group or just on his own, a FAR unit would halt.
Far?
Force Appropriate Response. You couldn't stop like the whole Army group for 1 or 2 zombies. A lot of the older Gs, the ones infected early in the war, they were starting to get all grody, all deflated, parts of their skulls starting to show, some bone poking through the flesh. Some of them couldn't even stand anymore, and those are the ones you really had to watch for. They'd be crawling on their bellies towards you or just thrashing face down in the mud. You'd halt a section, a platoon, maybe even a company, depending on how many you encountered, just enough to take them down and sanitize the battlefield. The whole your FAR unit left in the battle line was replaced by an equal force from the secondary line a click and a half behind you. That way the front was never broken. We leapfrogged this way all across the country. It worked, no doubt, but man, it took its time. Night also put the brakes on. Once the sun dipped, no matter how confident you felt or how safe the area seemed, the show was over till dawn the next morning. The strategy was always to surround the target area. We'd set up semi-permanent defenses, recon with everything from satellites to sniffer Ks, do whatever we could to call Zach out, and go in only after we were sure no more of them were coming. Smart and safe and relatively easy. Yeah, right. As far as surrounding the area, someone want to tell me where that area actually begins? Cities weren't cities anymore, you know? They just grew out of this suburban sprawl. Mrs. Ruiz, one of my medics, called it infill. She was in real estate before the war and explained that the hottest properties were always the land between 2 existing cities. Freaking infill. We all learned to hate that term. For us, it meant clearing block after block of burbland before we could even think of establishing a quarantine perimeter. Fast food joints, shopping centers, endless miles of cheap cookie-cutter housing. Even in winter, it's not like everything was safe and snuggly. I was in Army Group North. At first, I thought we were golden, you know? 6 months out of the year, I wouldn't even have to see a live G. 8 months, actually, given what wartime weather was like. I thought, hey, once the temp drops, we're little more than garbage men. Find 'em, lobo 'em, mark 'em for burial once the ground begins to thaw, no problem. But I should be loboed for thinking that Zach was the only bad guy out there. We had Quislings, just like the real thing, but winterized. We had these human reclamation units, pretty much just glorified animal control. They'd do their best to dart any Quislings we came across, tie 'em down, ship 'em to rehabilitation clinics, back when we thought we could rehabilitate 'em.